workers. Hey, replay crew. We are on the afternoon session of the penalty. Penalty if I about knocked myself in the head with my mic. We are on the afternoon session of the penalty phase of the Florida v. Jose Soto-Escalera trial. And Court TV chat wants the death penalty. What do you guys think? Either way, they don't do it right away. And as an introvert, this is going to come out wrong, but he's going to get a room to himself, a TV, books, a tablet, his meals delivered, his own private bathroom. That doesn't sound too bad to an introvert. I'm sorry. That's not funny, Debbie.
All right, we all ready for the jury? Let's bring in the jury. We'll get started.
How does everybody get lost? Does it not redirect everybody? Does it redirect some and not all? I gotta figure out how to put you where you're not like in my face, because when we go to the parks together, Grogu. Well, I'm sorry, Grogu. Where did you go? Oh, wow. No, she didn't. I'm sorry about that. Why are there... You guys see that? Well, you can't see it because it's not big enough.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. And of course, let me remind you,
Do you guys
the
see
trial
the little
continues.
slats in there?
Don't form any definite
What are
or
those
fixed
for?
opinion
I mean,
about what we're
it's got
doing
the
at this
fabric
time
over it,
until you've
but-
heard all of the evidence, the arguments by the attorneys, and the instructions on the law by me. Also, make sure to confine your decision in this case to the proper evidence and nothing else, so don't speak to anyone, including your fellow jurors, about the case until you begin to deliberate, of course, with
sorry.
regard to your fellow jurors.
Trying to
We
fix
continue
you.
on with the defense mitigation case, and Mr. Burns, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Judge May. We have Ms.
Oh,
Carrie
wow.
Schwartz to the witness chair.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Burns has advised me he intends to read a deposition. Is that correct, Mr.?
It is a transcript of a deposition, Your Honor.
And this person is not the deponent. This person is just being used to facilitate the presentation
Hold
of the
up.
evidence to you. So she's...
That was this morning. Where's this afternoon? Did they not start on time? Oh, wait. Here we go. So, are you... half brothers or full brothers? Like, did your parents call you by your middle names, or?
Members of the jury, we are about to conclude the case with the arguments by the attorneys. Before we do, the evidence is closed. However, I do want to instruct you that the parties agree or stipulate that the defendant in this case has no significant history of prior criminal activity. So the lawyers are about to argue the case to you. As I mentioned, the evidence is closed. What the attorneys say is not evidence, but do listen close to their arguments and to persuade you in your evaluation of the evidence
Where do
and
you live,
influence your
Sharon?
decision from their
Are you in
perspective.
Florida?
Both
'Cause
sides will
I'm
have
in
an
Florida.
opportunity to make an argument to you, but the state is allowed to proceed
Oh,
first.
wow.
And the state may proceed with its closing argument.
Think back again, all the way back to jury selection these many weeks ago, right? And we had talked about our ability to keep our word and follow the law, right? That's what we're here for. That's what we're here to do. We remind you again at the last closing argument, and I'm going to keep beating that drum, right? Because it's so important to be able to follow the law and to keep our word, particularly in a case such as this with the evidence that's been before you. When you do that, always view this evidence through the lens of objectivity, and to make sure that we render dispassionate verdict, right? You've been confronted with highly emotional evidence from both sides, right? And that's why it's important to view this evidence as dispassionately and as methodically as we can so that we arrive at the correct decision. Emotional people make bad decisions, right? Emotional people make bad decisions. That's why we've got to look at this evidence with objectivity, reason, and logic, right? So, having said that, this is what we're confronted with today. And again, I'm going to kind of go through this process again. I know we've heard it before, but we want to make sure that we get it right. So, to be clear, you are confronted with not one death sentence, but two, right? Two death sentences are on the table, one per count. Count one deals with the murder of Tanya, count two with the murder of Josiah. Each count is analyzed separately, and we use the same process that's been set forth in the jury instructions that was detailed to you by Judge Murray. Of course, the first step is we got to have a unanimous finding that the state proved at least one or more aggravating factors per count in order to proceed with the death penalty. Those have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And in this case, both counts share the same three aggravating factors, the same three, and then there's an additional aggravating factor for count two that deals with Josiah. So here they are. The first one, the defendant was contemporaneously convicted of another capital felony, right? Contemporaneously or at the same time. The murder was committed for financial gain. There's your second aggravator. The first-degree murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without pretense of moral or legal justification. All right, those are our three aggravators that are shared by both counts. Count two, in which Josiah is the identified victim. And this one is this. The victim of the first-degree murder was under the age of 12. That's it. That's it. And so we'll start with the easiest one first, right? The first aggravator, this should be unanimous, is this one. The victim of the first-degree murder was a person less than the age of 12. Well, what's our evidence to support that? Well, of course, it's straightforward, right? Tanya was pregnant. She was very far along into her pregnancy. We presented the testimony of Dr. Stossel, and what did Dr. Stossel say? Do you remember? He said, listen, this was a perfectly healthy child. This was a perfectly healthy child. Mom had some complications, and mom was high risk, but that child was perfectly healthy. So there's your unanimous aggravator, at least for count two. Then we go through the remaining aggravators and that apply to each count. So the first one. The defendant was contemporaneously convicted of another capital felony. Well, that's what we have here. This aggravator applies to each count because the homicides occurred at the same time, contemporaneous, at the same time. The count 2 would be an aggravator for count 1, and vice versa. Count 1 would be an aggravator for count 2. So this has already been proven, and it's reflected in your first verdict. Next, the first-degree murder was committed for financial gain. Let's talk about this. So in transcript, session 3 of 39, you heard the evidence. This is the words of the defendant. She's pregnant from that little a-hole that works there. She says it's mine supposedly. I can't take any chances. I lose everything. I'm going to blow her brains out so that she doesn't talk. I have to do it, Eric. I have no other choice. And then key sentence, I am going to lose everything. I am going to lose everything. And then he follows that up. If my wife found something like that out, oh my God, bro, I lose everything, bro. So there is our aggravator. So how do we arrive at financial gain from those particular circumstances, or from those particular statements? I'm going to lose everything. We all know what the consequences are of a possible divorce, right? That's what he's looking at in his mind. He's looking at a possible divorce. So what does that mean when he says, I'm going to lose everything? Well, first off, as we all know, just from common human experience, what happens? You get a divorce, your cost of living increase, you no longer have a second income. Remember, his wife is working with him at WastePro, right? His wife works with him at WastePro at the time of this, right? So we have that, and we also have, what do we have? Child support, right? This is his way out of paying child support. Now, it's important to keep in mind, this financial gain, it doesn't have to be the primary motive for this killing. Let me be very clear about that. This does not have to be the primary motive for this killing. It can be a motive for this killing. And that's the state's position in this case. It is a motive, not necessarily the primary motive. And it's borne out by this defendant's own statements. It's borne out by his own statements. I'm going to lose everything. That means his wife. That means financial, his ability to prosper financially. That means he can avoid child support. That's what that means. And that's the aggravator in that particular case. Next one, and the most significant, right? The capital felony was a homicide and was committed in a cold, calculated, premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. Okay, here we go. Remember, and the jury instructions define it. What happens is it defines each subpart, right? Cold, calculated, premeditated. I'm going to walk you through each one of them. Cold. This is what the jury instructions say. It means the murder was the product of cool and calm reflection, right? Cool and calm reflection. What's our evidence that supports that definition? Well, here it is. 2 days prior to the murder. The murder happened on August 23rd of 2018. This statement was made on August 21st of 2018. Listen and think about what he says here. I just can't do it inside my truck. It won't hurt me if it's not my truck. I got to strangle that bee. You can't leave no blood or nothing in the truck. I don't want nothing. If they ever come asking about anything, there's nothing. It's like you said, there's no other way around it. It's like you said, you got two, unintelligible, and that's it. All the BS will be over, and the higher up around here, the more they'll blame her boyfriend. Because they're always fighting, you know what I'm saying? She now has a record in which someone did something to her. You know what I'm saying, all that S. So think about what he's talking about here. He's already developed a plan as to how he's going to kill her. He's already developed a plan as to how he's going to execute. I said her, it's both of them, right? As to how he's going to execute both of them. This is his plan, and he's smart enough to know I can't do it inside my truck, right? Because he's trying to figure out a way to not leave blood. I got to strangle that bee, right? So he's coming up and he's developing this plan, and it's with an eye towards avoiding detection, right? He's minimizing his risk. He's trying to get away with this, right? So I can't leave no blood. Of course, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? He did leave blood in the truck. He did leave blood in the truck. But 2 days beforehand, his plan is to get away with a double homicide. Think about what he's saying here. And the higher up around here, presumably he means law enforcement. The more they'll blame her boyfriend, right? The more they'll blame her boyfriend, because they're always fighting. You know what I'm saying? She has a record in which someone did something to her, meaning that the law enforcement will look and find out cases in which she's been a past victim, and then they'll point the finger at him, right? Think about that. Not only has he developed a plan to execute his eyes than that, his plan is more devious than that. What does he do? He is attempting to frame this so that someone else can be blamed for the murder. Right? Someone else, an innocent person, can be blamed for these murders. That was his plan. That was his plan. Not only to execute these people, but to get away with it. And third, to make sure an innocent person was convicted in his stead. Extreme facts call for an extreme sentence. Extreme facts call for an extreme sentence. Was all of this, the questions before you was all of this, is that the product of cool and calm reflection? Absolutely it was. Absolutely it was. Calculated. Calculated means having a careful plan or prearranged design to commit murder. Okay, so what are our facts that support that particular sub-element? Well, again, 2 days prior to the murders, he's in this waste road truck and they're driving around with Eric Alvarado. And what does he say? You can't prove anything if no one saw anything. I was thinking of taking her to some field nearby the route. Adolfo Cavelli testified the scene of the crime was on his trash route, right? So his plan, he was able to execute his plan, right? So he took to a place near the trash route. Do you know where I go? When she disappears for a couple of days, she does that. She disappears for 2 or 3 days. She always does that. And I'll take her phone and I'll throw it away. I'll throw it away or I'll burn it. They can't do anything there. I have everything planned out. This was not, ladies and gentlemen, a homicide or homicides that was committed at the spur of the moment, in heat of passion, when someone's upset, when somebody wasn't thinking through the consequences of his actions. Oh no, he admitted, he stated, he had everything planned out. Extreme facts call for an extreme punishment. Meditate. Remember, this is of the jury instructions. It's no different than what you found during the guilt phase. It defines premeditation.
StreamYard's sick of jumping back and forth too, apparently. Was it that long? I didn't even think it was that long. It didn't take any time at all. Like the shortest guilty verdict or the shortest deliberation, I think, of any trial I have covered. So I'm expecting another quick one with this. So yeah, I think we're going to get it today. I have to, hang on a second. To get the sound back, I have to reshare.
Level of premeditation demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection is required. So that's the difference. That's the difference for the aggravator. The aggravator adds on this requirement of demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection. So what we have is we've already gone through statements where he's made 2 days in advance about how he's planned it out, right? 2 days in advance he's planned it out. But do you remember, think back to Kenneth Barron during the guilt phase, right? Kenneth Barron was the guy, he comes in and he says, listen, this defendant approached me about a ghost gun, right? He approached me about a ghost gun. And when did he do it? 2 to 4 weeks before, right? 2 to 4 weeks before. If he's to be believed, and we have no reason to disbelieve him, is there enough evidence to support the proposition that the defendant was thinking about this murder and planning it out and premeditating it out 2 to 4 weeks before it happened? Of course there is. Of course there is. What Kenneth Barron said fits in with all of the other facts and all the other evidence that was gleaned in the state's case, right? Is there any reason to disbelieve Kenneth Barron? All of this evidence, all of it shows that the state has been able to establish this particular aggravator beyond a reasonable doubt. And then the final sub-element is this. It was carried out without any pretense of moral or legal justification, and then it defines that as any claim of justification or excuse, though insufficient to reduce the degree of murder, rebuts the cold, calculated, premeditated nature of the murder. Okay, so have you been presented with any evidence that would either justify or excuse these homicides? No. No. There's no question that we have proven this aggravator beyond a reasonable doubt. And so remember, then we get to the mitigating evidence, right? Then we get to the mitigating evidence. And let's take a fair look at it and figure out where to go from here. And remember, as we all discussed in jury selection, we consider everything, right? Everything we consider. But then after that, what do? We figure out how much weight it deserves, right? So that's what the law says. The most impactful mitigator certainly is the fact that this defendant has no significant criminal history. You obviously consider that and obviously give it whatever weight that you believe it deserves. It's up to you to decide how much value this mitigator has after you weigh it against the aggravators, right? So it's weighed against it. The first, I think it was the first witness that was presented yesterday was Raul Bonasco. He was the fellow who testified via Zoom. He's your prison expert, and he worked with the Department of Corrections. I think he's in Texas now. And he came in, and if I understood him correctly, the gist of his testimony was, well, okay, we get it. The defendant will adjust well to prison life, and he's going to be able to follow all the rules and not become a problem. So that's what you're being asked to believe, okay? Well, let's think about that. Let's consider that for a second. If I understood Bonasco's testimony correctly, he met with the defendant for an hour and a half, right? He talked to the defendant, someone who is facing the death penalty, and he talked to him for an hour and a half. He then reviewed the defendant's behavioral records from St. Lucie County Jail, right? And based on that, he arrives at the conclusion that he will not be a problem in prison. Okay. Even if he were to be able to accurately predict that, and there's no guarantee that he can. After all, he's going to go to prison, right? If there is ever an unpredictable environment in this world, it would be prison, right? You're not talking about a bunch of rule followers in prison. They're there for a reason. So let's assume that let's just, for argument's sake, let's be fair. For argument's sake, let's assume that he can accurately predict that, right? Let's assume that he's accurate in that. How much weight do you give that, right? How much weight would you honestly assign that when you're looking at the aggravating evidence in this case? How much weight would that be? Would that honestly give and fairly give? When you view this evidence objectively, when you view it objectively, how much weight would you give that? The answer is very little, very little. So then we get to Lucinda Cook. Lucinda Cook is the ex-girlfriend. She says that she was in a relationship with him between 2006 and 2012. She didn't have a meaningful conversation with this defendant for 13 years, right? That was her testimony. She has not spoken to him in a meaningful way for 13 years until just a few weeks ago. I think her testimony was a month ago I spoke to him. So either during the jury selection process or right before the jury selection process, the defendant re-enters her life, right? The defendant re-enters her life. Okay, again, and she also said, well, he was never violent with me. Okay, he was never violent with her. Okay, so again, the question is, and only you can answer this, is how much weight would you assign that? Right? How much weight would you honestly assign that? Somebody who hasn't spoken to him in 13 years, how much weight do we give that evidence? Very little. It's very little. And then, of course, today you have the defendant's mother and his other family members. Okay, again, highly emotional testimony, as you would expect, right? And of course, they're going to have good things to say about him, as you would expect, right? No surprise, as you would expect. His mother is going to come in and say nice things about her son in these horrific, horrific circumstances. So my question would be, how much weight would you give that, right? I mean, if we're here to give our reasoned judgment and weigh the facts and the evidence out and apply it to the law in as dispassionate a way as we possibly can, right? We're not here to be swayed by our emotions. Emotional people make bad decisions. If we weigh this out as dispassionately as we possibly can, would we give this testimony any weight? I think you give it minimal weight. At best, you give it minimal weight. And of course, we finally arrive at the weighing process, right? And again, this is directly from the jury instructions that we spoke about at length during jury selection. And it's very, very straightforward, very, very simple. You know, whether sufficient aggravating factors exist, which of course they do, and then whether the proven aggravating factors outweigh the proven mitigating factors. That's it. That's all you do. So I end with this. You know, our criminal justice system relies on accountability, right? Our criminal justice system demands accountability. And part of that is to punish people proportionate to the crimes that they've committed. Punish them proportionate to the crimes that they have committed. This defendant, he murdered Tania and Josiah Wise for no other reason than he believed that he would lose everything if his wife found out about the pregnancy. He could have come clean to his wife. He could have paid child support. He could have been accountable to his wife. But he didn't do that. He planned this murder out for a lengthy period of time, and he executed that plan. That's what he did. That's what you found. Extreme facts call for an extreme sentences. That's what we're here for today. Ladies and gentlemen, this defendant deserves not one, but 2 death sentences. Extreme facts call for extreme sentence. That's what I'm asking you to impose today. I'm asking you to impose a unanimous vote on both counts for the death sentence in each count. On behalf of Tom Backetall, your state attorney, on behalf of the people of the state of Florida, I thank you for your patience and your service this month. Thank you very much. It is, I speak for everybody, it is truly appreciated on everybody's part. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Richardson, any defense argument? Mr. Burns?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Greetings also to you. Tania Wise.
Josiah Wise, murdered by Jose, who is my client. The trial is always about the accused, but the case is about those two. The main facts of the case are that they are not here anymore. And I tell you that because it's true. And I tell you that because I wish you to recognize that I know it. None of the evidence that has come before you has been received by me in any inhuman or different way than you have received it. I've just lived with it for a much longer time. I wish to respond to some of the things that Prosecutor Richardson just indicated. He made a very strong case, and I told you yesterday that I am not going to quarrel with the fact that this was a coldly and calculatedly and premeditatedly done act. We have Jose's voice in his truck a couple of days before this. That was his plan. I don't dispute that. So what does that mean for you? Well, it means you're going to unanimously find that there is an aggravator. And the gate is swinging wide open for you to kill him if you want to now. Last legal requirement is met. The baby, I told you yesterday, that those photos look to me much like a newborn baby. Certainly less than 12 years of age. I don't argue that aggravator. Now there are two. I'm here to try to save my guy's life, not insult your intelligence. Those two factors are there. I don't have arguments against them that are in any way meaningful. That the crimes were committed while there were contemporaneous other capital felonies going on. Jose kills Tania, the baby, is a contemporaneous crime. They work back and forth as aggravators. If you wish to find them so unanimously, I will only say this: the existence of the baby Josiah, the fact that Tania was pregnant, is clearly a central fact. But Jose's intent, while it would necessarily have to cover the baby, his anger, his hatred, whatever it was that was really pushing him and motivating him along, was aimed at Tanya. There were no abdominal injuries, no indication of hatred toward the
Please.
baby. Mr. Richardson tells you that because Jose said I'd lose everything, that therefore, beyond a reasonable doubt, you should all conclude that this crime was done for or affected by financial gain. No, that is not proved. If you are about losing marriage, that doesn't mean you're worried because there might be financial implications. If you're worried about losing your job because your wife is a supervisor, the uncontroverted evidence before you is that Jose has worked steadily since he's 15 and been totally self-sufficient. A divorce is not going to knock him off kilter. Fearing having to look for a new job is not going to prompt him to do a murder. That this crime was done for financial gain is not proved beyond a reasonable doubt, because of the consequences of divorce, because of child support. He paid child support for 3 children, is the evidence before you, and gave groceries and clothing for the 4th. That is not proved. Extreme facts require, says the state, an extreme sentence.
That makes this worse in my opinion.
These are horrible facts. Every murder is comprised of horrible facts and would consist of photos of a victim in sight, photos of a victim during autopsy. Jose, according to the evidence, planned to get Tanya to a place and kill her. That's every mob hit ever. Let's get Paulie to the club and we'll whack him. That's not an extreme fact. That's an ordinary fact. We're talking about facts of murder, mind you. We're talking about murder.
She was
To get someone to a
pregnant.
place where no one can see to do the crime is not extreme, it's common. In murder. Raul Benasco spent 90 minutes with Jose. Perhaps Mr. Richardson would prefer that he moved in with him for a year in his cell. How long is a man supposed to sit with them to learn some history and review his prison record, which is what the man's expertise is all about? That Lucinda Cook had no communication with Jose for 13 years and yet came in here after all that time to speak on his behalf doesn't count against him, it counts for him. What kind of an impression did he make on her? That after all this time she consults, she prays, and she comes in. When other people are jumping ship, she comes in. And her intention is not to tell you who he is now or quarrel with you about your verdict. It's to say, look, whatever you found that he did, I'm surprised by it because that's not the way he behaved with me and with my children. With us, he made us feel safe.
You guys. You're going to hate me by the end of this because I'm going to have paused it 1 billion times. She chose not to speak to him for 13 years. He came in where she worked and she just treated him like every other customer. She chose not to speak to him. But then his children asked her to speak on his behalf and she felt guilty because of the children. And if he loved his wife, he wouldn't have cheated on her.
And that takes me to kind of one of the topics.
And killing a pregnant woman is not like get Polly to the club so we can whack him. Good Lord. I'm sorry, y'all.
That I want to discuss with you. I had hoped to just roll through here without having to refer to anything written, but the situation changed with my witnesses and whatnot, and so I'm going to refer to some topics here, and then I'm going to explain them to you. And one of the things that's going on here, I'm going to refer to as box and balloon. Box and balloon, it sounds like a kid's game. Bear with me here. The box is the life of Jose Soto-Escalera. In toto, everything. From birth to now, certainly from birth to the time he did the murder. And as you heard from his family, yeah, it's what's expected from family. Would your family come in and run you under the bus? I hope not. So, he was good. He was generous. He was uplifting. He was a mediator. He left and encouraged us to come out. There were good things to Jose. He comes to Florida. There are women who say good things about him. Madeline Colon and Lucinda Cook. He has long-term relationships with them. He supports emotionally and otherwise children that are his and that aren't his. He brings safety to women who are recovering from traumatic relationships. All that is in the box. At the bottom, we insert a balloon. The balloon is this crime. It is this murder. It inflates because it is the chief act within all the acts of that box. The question for you is, how big does the balloon get? Does it crowd out every other thing in a man's existence to the point where you regard him as almost inhuman and therefore like a cigarette butt or a cockroach? He's not. He's a horrible, horrible killer. And other things too. One of the topics I have written down here is humility. Humility. I recommend humility to myself. I don't always follow. I recommend humility to most people in most circumstances, and I most absolutely recommend it to you here in thinking about this. Why do I say this? Because he made an impression on me. When I sat back while Ms. Minton did all the work early in the case, I was watching and I was listening and I was very, very impressed with your confidence. How confidently you all said, this one I'd kill him, I'd kill him, I'd kill him, this one, I don't know. You're very confident in your ability to make these judgments, and I wonder, in addition to being impressed, I say, how do these people come by this confidence? Do you have education? Do you have experience in this regard? You were on the streets a couple of weeks ago, now you're in here deciding who lives and who dies. That's correct according to the law. And it's probably good that we don't leave it up to just one person. But I still think you ought to think about how perfectly suited you are to do this. Take a look. Think. How do you think? When's the last time or when was the first time any of you thought about how you think? Probably not. It's a thing you do. You put on your shoes, you make a bowl of cereal, you think. You're thinking all day, your mind's taking you here and there. How exactly does it work? When have you examined the functioning of your brain? Look to that door right there. Let's use our imaginations. These folks here are essentially asking you to put a target on Jose's back and make arrangements for death to do his thing with this guy, because the law permits you to do it and you would decide that's what should be done. So through that door now comes death. Death is coming in, coming through the gate. Death is right here. I'm asking you to imagine death is right here in the room with us. How many of you perceive death right here in the room with us as a female? None of you, right? As a child, none of you, right? It was some hulking, some version of the Grim Reaper, right? You have conclusions and ways and things in your brain and you don't even know how they got in there. Death could be a woman. Death could be a child. It could be a noxious cloud. But you, I'm pretty sure, had death as a male. In what other ways do you think or make decisions and you're not even exactly sure what? This is intended to be an abiding decision. Live with you forever. Like your religion, like you love your children, like your sports team, things you don't change. And so if you decide to kill Jose, that means that you are right now, today, knowing how you're going to think forever, right now you're going to lock your brain into an unyielding rigidity that says, kill him. And if someone asks you next year, or in 10 years, or in 20 years, oh yeah, I'm still good with it. That's what it means. That's why I say you should approach this with some humility.
I would have objected. They're not killing him.
I want you to imagine something else. I'm going to call it a spectrum of death. Jose is on it. Over here is one end. And I'm at this end, and you're at this end, and everyone else in this room is at this end because we had no involvement with killing. Never killed anyone? Never thought about it? And certainly didn't engineer it and make a heavy-duty recommendation that it be done. We are all over here, unstained and unsullied by any association with death and killing. Jose is on the spectrum here.
I would so object.
Jose is on the spectrum. Let's make this mark on the spectrum where we started with Ashley Minton's questions to you. In the next courtroom over, we've got a murderer, a first-degree murderer who intended to do it. Now, we have a little more than that. We have some aggravators. So Jose's a little further on the spectrum of death. Way out here at the other end of the spectrum of death is we'll put our state actors. Your Hitlers, your Stalins, people who killed in the millions. It's not really relevant to us, but it's out there because what you need to comprehend, and I don't know if it's ever come through in all the system, in all the sessions that we had, how do we decide what is a death penalty case? The people that you send to Tallahassee, where they become geniuses and philosopher kings, they look at the spectrum of murder, all of it, and say, okay, where are we going to pin it to say what is a death penalty case? And so, the whole circumstance that we found ourselves in, since the first group came in here on September 2nd, is we are wallowing around in death and talking about death, and the first thing we do before we give a trial is talk about the death penalty. And you're a jury of Jose's peers. But as you know, from your individual groups, a lot of your peers didn't like the death penalty, but they're on the outside of the door now. So what I'm looking at is a box full of, I won't say killers, but people who are comfortable with it. You all said many times, oh yeah. Up and down the roadside, will you invoke death? Yeah, I'll do. Yes. You're the same people who just convicted him. And I'm just one guy with some words. And I'm afraid you're going to roll right through me and try and kill him, but you don't have to. Here's one simple thing. And in thinking about this argument and then making it, I kept coming back to it because I'm a very simple person, possibly a simpleton. And it is this: why would any ordinary, decent person with a conscience orchestrate a death if they don't have to? Why would you make someone die if it's not required? And it is not required under any circumstances that you have heard or will hear. If Jose is to die judicially, it's because you did it. You want it to be done. The judge can't do it on his own. You have to do it. And so you, I'll use the word contort, but maybe your brains flip right into that position naturally. I say you have to contort yourself and everything you believe and your conscience is to get to a place where you can say, I'm morally comfortable with killing a guy. Let me talk about some of the mitigators. Where's my list of mitigators? There are a lot of mitigators. There are always a lot of mitigators because anything can be a mitigator. And I'm behind the 8 ball. So I'm going to throw a lot of mitigators out there. I don't suggest they're all of equal weight. I don't even consider them all of equal weight. But I don't know which one you back there latch onto. So I'm going to run through them quick. I might highlight a couple of them. This list will be attached to the instructions. It will be part of the instructions that the judge will read you, so you don't have to remember it. There are 29 of them, and some of them strike the same theme, but if Jose was nice to 4 people, I'm going to name them all individually. As you have heard, as the judge has told you, there's no dispute that Jose has no significant history of prior criminality. That I will highlight for a moment, because that is an extraordinary fact. Do you recognize that? This is a convicted double murderer who did nothing prior. And I think that's important, and I suggest you should think that's important, because if I'm going to make a heavy recommendation that a judge kill someone, it should be a bad person. It should be a very bad person. It should be a pretty bad person through and through. That's not who Jose is. This is an explosion of violence that comes out of nowhere in his life. It doesn't make it any better. Still makes it a murder. But it doesn't make him the type of utterly useless human who you might want to put down. He's not utterly useless. And this is not in keeping with anything that he has exhibited before. And that is very important. Jose was abandoned by his father as a child, raised in chronic poverty. I'm going to stop on that one for a minute, because we did discuss that many times, and a lot of people in jury selection didn't like it. And remember, we're past the guilt phase. No one is saying, poor Jose,
That's
you
fine,
let him go
John.
because he grew up in poverty.
Well,
But poverty brings challenges. That's all I ask you to recognize. You know,
you can't though.
we acknowledge the importance of two-parent homes and sufficient money to meet our needs, and yet if people don't have that, we really don't cut them any slack about it. All I'm saying is consider it as a mitigating factor. He
Well-
had less than probably you, and
This isn't regular closing arguments. This is the penalty phase, and because this is for the death penalty, that's why he's talking about the death penalty. But what I would object to is, like, he's basically saying to the jury, if you vote for the death penalty, you're a murderer just like he is. That's basically what he's saying. And I don't think that's right. So it's not that he's talking about the death penalty. It's like he's saying, well, you're no better than he is if you do that. And I don't think that, like Terry said, he's putting a guilt trip on them. And that's not fair, because you're not supposed to play to a jury's emotions. That is, I don't know what it's called, but that's a rule of law school. I don't know what it's called because I'm not a lawyer, but that's a rule. You can't play to their emotions. And that's exactly what he's doing. Because, like, who wants to be a murderer? If they walk away thinking, if I vote for the death penalty, that makes me a murderer, they're not going to do it. He killed a pregnant woman that was going to give birth in a week. That was a fully developed baby.
the others. I don't know exactly what that means. My dad was a school teacher. Jose suffers from transgenerational family trauma. There's problems with the mama, problems with him, problems growing up in Bridgeport with no money. Chronic exposure to trauma during his childhood. The mama seems to remember the house being fine and the neighborhood fine, but it was not fine. You heard from the cousins, this is not fine. Drugs were dealt on the streets and crime street on the scene. And that's not an ordinary way to grow up. Jose can positively contribute to society in prison as a worker. I don't contend that that is an especially weighty concern, but it is a totally relevant concern because remember, where is it? It's life without parole. Look, it's like the forgotten option somewhere. Well, I blow the dust off it and it looks pretty good. It looks fine to me. Life without parole. Let's remember, and I will recall to you what you told us also at the same time, within probably 2 seconds of telling us you all can impose the death penalty, you all said you would. consider life without a possibility of parole. And if you're sitting here now not doing it, you're not following the law and you're not doing your job. If you decided last week he's guilty and you're going to kill him, you're working a charade and a fraud on us right now. So everybody's mind better be open. You don't have to like what I'm telling you, but you got to listen to it. And you told us you would consider it. And I'm not exactly striking the tone of a beggar here, but nevertheless, you have a job to do, and I'm going to make sure that you do it. Jose has established and maintains long-term, substantive, meaningful relationships with friends. Jose has established close family bonds and relationships with his cousins. You know penalties have consequences that ripple.
Yeah,
You're
and
gonna
you
kill
know
someone.
who can't.
You know that. You heard from the victims.
And you know who can't maintain relationships with their close friends and family? Tanya and Josiah. That's who can't.
Jose has maintained a close relationship with his mother, maintains close family bonds with his children.
Not Josiah.
You know, that's supposed to be the motive here. And yet he's had opportunity galore and never killed anyone. That doesn't mean he didn't do this, he did. But if he is monstrously wrong for killing one child, you can't deny him or deny the existence of the fact that he helped and contributed and lived a meaningful part of his other children's lives for a long time. I don't know if there's a rug back in the jury room, but you would not be doing right to pick up the corner of it and sweep facts you don't like under it. Jose demonstrated exemplary jail behavior. He poses no danger to prison staff or inmates. Again, these are all relevant considerations if he is going to be living for years before execution and living out the rest of his life in prison. How he will do in prison is completely relevant for you to consider. Jose has been a positive influence on family members. Jose will be required to work 60 hours a week. That's every day in DOC. As a prisoner, you know, Jose is a prisoner. He's been a prisoner for 7 years. When you capture prisoners in war, you don't kill them. It's a war crime. But here, it's okay to kill prisoners. Think about that. You're being asked to kill a prisoner.
Yeah, that'll work.
He's neutered. He's nothing. He's been in handcuffs and shackles behind bars in a secure jail, guarded 24/7 for more than 7 years. What is the need to kill him? You got that much of an urge? Take him out of his cage and put him down? He's helpless. He's hopeless. That's enough. Your common sense should tell you, your understanding of the world, at least the United States, should tell you that there's plenty of states that don't have a death penalty at all. And they might say, well, he's a prisoner. You got killed. You kill prisoners. That's where your morality is. You kill prisoners. Who's more helpless than a prisoner? Jose was a positive influence on his former girlfriends and their children. Jose can be redeemed. For that matter, you know what Jose did 7 years ago. Do you know where his head is at now? If he's taken out in several years and executed, you kill the body, but what is his head? Where will his mind be at, do you know? Will he be the same person? Because that's how punishment works, of course. Who among us hasn't suddenly snatched up one of our children, put him over our knee, administered a spanking, and said, that's for what you did 7 months ago? It's not how punishment should work. Jose provides support for his children. No prior history of violence. No criminality, no violence. He has helped his former girlfriend and his son's mother escape dangerous domestic violence situations. He has always been a hard worker in manual labor fields, furniture delivery, security work, others. Jose escaped a high crime, high poverty area independently, moving to Florida when he was just 15 years old, and he made it on his own. Despite lacking the opportunity to complete his education, he overcame that lack of education through consistent work ethic. He never took a dime of public money, even though he was just a teenager. And again, that undercuts the argument that he did this killing in any way connected to or for or thereabouts pecuniary or financial gain. He's always had to work and always had money. Jose has exhibited excellent courtroom behavior. You probably know that people accused of crimes, especially murderers, especially in long trials and processes, they don't always keep their mouths shut and they don't always behave. Jose has behaved just as he has behaved as an inmate. Jose will continue to offer positive life influence on his children, family members, and friends who have become emotionally dependent on him. He began working and earning money to help support his family at a young age. He's always been self-supporting, as I mentioned, not a drain on society. Some, if not all of those, you should find exist a little more likely than not, and then you are required to consider them. What weight you give them is completely up to you. This part of the process seemed to confuse a lot of your fellow people who didn't make it onto the jury, who kept insisting that the law, they're just going to follow the law. The law is depositing you at crossroads if you don't realize it yet. Okay, you won't tell what will happen here. Life, forever and ever, until we die and they take you out of prison, or death penalty. And the law doesn't tell you which one. But the law does tell you that life without possibility of parole, like the child option here, is not a child option, it's perfectly good.
Okay, dude, I think you got it.
The law gives you a choice because it's perfectly happy with the life. Perfectly happy. And so should you be. It will keep you off the spectrum of death. If you do order and recommend that Jose be killed, you're not outside over here on the spectrum of death. You move closer to him. You're not involved in him killing. Not that you'll do it yourself. You'll just set the first domino falling that will result in it.
I already did it. Did you miss it?
Jurors isolated from the execution. You're making a moral decision, but you're not making it in a vacuum, and don't think because it will happen years down the line and you won't be there and it won't be in your hand that you're not responsible. That's my point to you. You are responsible. The prison's far away. You're still responsible if it happens.
What?
Well, someone else in the state's employ, the state executioner will do it, so
Okay, Judy called it.
your hands will be dirty, but it's your handiwork that will be done.
What? Dude.
So don't think of it as just, you making a death recommendation is like dropping some instructions off on your secretary's desk as you leave for a long weekend. It is not. Victim impact statements. We heard from several members of Tanya's family.
Yeah.
Her mother, I suggest, especially, and her son, who I thought testified very impressively
Yeah,
for his
family
mother.
that are missing a daughter and a grandson.
And it may not matter coming from me, but I'm quite certain his mother is proud of him and would be proud of him. But I hate victim impact statements, not for the reason you probably think.
What? Well, boo-hoo.
Because in fact, I love victim impact statements done right. Victims should have a voice. They should be heard, especially in crimes of violence and especially in loss of life cases. I think victim impact statements should be published in the newspaper and court administration should pay for it. They should have a voice. But here, in this process, that voice is best expressed to the judge with experience, not to the jurors with none. Because within this tight process that you're following that might lead to someone's death, in comes these victim impact statements, and where do they fit into the process? They do not. What will the judge tell you? Well, the purpose is to establish the uniqueness of the victim and the impact on the family and community. Who would dispute that a murder victim is unique? Everyone in here.
She wants to
We're
smack
all
this guy
the
so
same,
bad.
all
Look at her.
exactly different. Of course, Tania Wise is unique and special and has special characteristics and qualities.
And of course his family doesn't want him to die.
But the
Duh.
only thing that you're instructed to do is not regard it as an aggravator. Well, what are you hearing it for then? It for sure ain't no mitigator.
Well, then what
Every
is he
single
hearing
one
his
of those
family
statements
for
is like an
then?
emotion bomb, a sympathy grenade going off, bespattering the walls with sympathy. Not from my guy.
Dude, shut
In
up
fact,
and
it
sit
is so
down.
much seeming like an aggravator that you have to be told it's not an aggravator. So that's one thing I don't like about it, that it's dropped in here unfairly. It operates against me and my client, but what am I supposed to do with it? What are you supposed to do with it? It's not an aggravator, and you're only supposed to be deciding the case on aggravators and mitigators, so what are you supposed to do with it? And the other reason I don't like it is because it lends itself to being a victim ranking system. If Tania Wise had no family whatsoever to come in here for her and give victim impact statements, is her life and her murder any less important thereby? No. If Tania Wise was the chief of surgery at the local hospital and saved hundreds of lives through her surgical skills, would that make a difference? It should not. One man, one vote, one murder victim, all the same. They're all the
One
same.
murder victim.
Every life is valued the same. No life is valued more than
Two.
another.
She was pregnant.
If Tania had nobody to come, if
Crackhead.
that whole segment was not here at all. Okay, it's victim impact time. No one stay here. So what are you supposed to do? She must not be worth very much. Right? Or, look, it's 100 people coming, she must be worth so much. It's a victim ranking system, it stinks. Everyone's the same. No one deserves to be killed, no matter who you are. And so I don't like it for that reason. Look, this case is loaded with emotion from top to bottom. And that's just a gigantic injection of it, and for what? I'm not sure what you're supposed to do with it, and you can't be sure either, because it doesn't fit in. It's not an aggravator or a mitigator. That's what we're doing here. We're weighing aggravators and mitigators. We're figuring out factors of his character that might lead you to not kill him.
Okay.
That Tania is unique. That her family is mourning. That there's a void that won't be filled. Yes. But that's not the point. The point is that she is a person who should be alive and is not now, due to Jose's criminality. Who she is important, but it's important outside of this process. Here's another one of my little topics that I wrote. This is not a fixable situation. You know that. Tanya's gone for 7 years now. Josiah never had a chance. Never began. Whether he is imprisoned, Jose, for the rest of his life, or whether he gets taken out at some point and injected to death, whatever they put in there, Tanya and Josiah will not come back. It can't be made right. And we, you, me, that doesn't, it just doesn't fit right. And I think it especially doesn't fit right for Americans because we don't, okay, what are we going to do about it? Let's do something. There's nothing meaningful that can be done. If there are people rooting for the death of Jose, I don't know that there are. If that day comes, they may experience a moment or a day of satisfaction, but I think the next day after, the heaviness and the sadness of the loss is still there. It's undiminished. That's the fact. He lives or dies is less important than the loss that cannot be made right. Killing him won't fix it. It won't fix it. It won't take the pain away. Let's talk about something that we mentioned
Why are you still talking?
in jury selection. Which, by the way, does it seem that Ms. Minton, that poor Ashley did so much of the work here in this case and I did relatively so little? That's my fault. Here's a little inside baseball for you. This is my case. I am lead attorney in the case, and Ms. Minton works for me, so to speak, under my supervision. And I could have done everything, or I could have done nothing. But like I told you yesterday, I waited a long time for my chance to speak to you. And the detectives among me have already figured out, because I knew I would be here. I knew there would be a penalty phase. And I figured that this would be the hottest part of the trial for Mr.
So you knew.
Jose Soto-Escalera.
You knew he was guilty. You knew he would be here. You let Minton get up and say that she had all these other boyfriends that could have been the killer. You did that. You tried to let her get up there and lie to try to get this man freedom. So now you're going to get up here and say, this is my case. I knew we would be here after I lied to y'all. So now please don't kill him. Jeez. I don't see Tanya's mom now. Did she leave? She was there a minute ago. When I said that she looked like she wanted to slap that man, that was a close-up of Tanya's mom.
And so I figured that this ought to be my post of duty and not Miss Ashley's post of duty. But everything that has transpired in this courtroom has been done with my knowledge and my approval from the defense side of things. And you know what? You know why? Maybe
Did
you think
she leave? I don't see her now.
Hey, Attorney Burns, what did you drag us to a trial for if you figured your guy was guilty
But
already?
she's going to be sitting on this side, right?
Because they're trying to kill my guy. And they're going to cross every
Just
T and
not.
dot every I before they get to do that. Late in a losing game,
I don't see a
a
wedding
losing
ring.
effort, the final seconds click off the clock. The quarterback doesn't drop back in the pocket and take a knee and give up. He heaves the ball as far as he can and hopes for a miracle. Do you think you are the only ones who can read and understand and appreciate and see evidence and what it means? I've been doing this for a long time. Whatever you can do in that regard, I can do better. I knew I would be here. And we make no apologies for fighting every step of the way, including now. And frankly, I feel like I'm in the last ditch, maybe fighting you all off, and I got nothing but a rusty sword in my hand, a slingshot, nothing but words.
He is? He's not wearing a wedding
And I
ring.
really don't want you to kill my guy. But we're going to talk now about mercy. I hear some of your voices. I hear them from here saying, oh, counselor. Attorney Burns, I was kind of half with you, sort of paying attention up to this point, but mercy for this guy? Mercy. You may, if you hearken back just a few weeks, you will recall when Miss Ashley was addressing this topic with you. The point that was attempted to be made and the distinction to be made is how does mercy work? Does the guy who gets it have to earn it? People who give it, just give it?
No, that wasn't.
The concept, I believe, that was attempted to be...
No, we're talking about is the lawyer married? The one that burned his clothes was an ex-girlfriend. And the defendant is divorced. His wife that he was married to, that he didn't want to find out he was cheating, she divorced him. Yes, he was married at the time. He killed Tanya because he didn't want her to find out. But she found out. And so she's divorced from him. The two witnesses, the one that the testimony was read and the one that actually testified, they were both in previous abusive relationships and they treated him like crap, but he never was violent with them. So they were like, he's not a violent person. And then all his family got up there and said, he's not a violent person. Well, he wasn't then. But he's been convicted of murdering a woman and her unborn child. So that makes him a violent person.
Taught to you, and there's not really much time in that classroom where you have to address 20 other matters, is that mercy is always in the power of the victor. Weak people, losers, don't get to grant mercy. People who have power get to grant mercy. And so, whether it's withheld or granted, has very little to do with the recipient and very much to do with you, the grantors. It's a statement of who you are.
You're fine.
And so, if any of you are still even within earshot on this issue of mercy, you need to just consult yourself and say, look, am I a merciful person or not? What does mercy mean in this case? The merciful thing is to condemn Jose to live for decades and decades and decades in prison behind bars until he dies. To become institutionalized and infantilized over time and told when to go to bed and when lights on and lights out and when to eat and not to eat and look through the bars and never get out. If I imprison you guys in your old high schools, how long would it be before you went crazy?
I liked high school. Didn't have to worry
You'll
about
be in a
money.
prison.
I liked to
That's
study.
most people would not consider that a merciful
I like to take
result,
tests. I'd have fun.
but that's what mercy means here. So it's not a great big fat dollop of mercy, go forth Jose. It's a little job that says, I'm so all the mercy that would be requested here. Let me take you back a couple of days, and I'm going to read you some words that Judge Merman read to you in describing the elements of first-degree murder.
Can't you sit down now?
And then I'm going to make an argument from that by reworking those words a little bit. None of what I say to you is a legal instruction. It's just an argument. It's just food for thought. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. That's what the judge read to you. Now I'm gonna change it up a little bit. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind of each juror at the time of engineering the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass
Action
between
improper.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for objecting. It's about time. You cannot call a jury murderers because they vote for the death penalty. And to be honest, I am pro death penalty, but in this case, I don't really care. Ray, this was his first offense. But since he does have a habit, well, he's going to go to life without parole, so it doesn't matter. I was going to say, because he does have a habit of sticking it where it doesn't belong, but he won't get parole, though. So, and Florida has no parole. Life is life. So, this case, and to me, not that it's ever going to happen, but if I were to be facing life without parole, I'd rather have the death penalty. Because to me, living in prison for the rest of my life seems like a worse punishment. I don't see her mom anymore. Did her mom leave? And you know what else, though? I don't know this for obviously not like people that do things to kids. So when the other inmates find out what he did, like, he's probably gonna catch hell in prison, right? So he won't even live if they vote for the death penalty. He might not even live to see the death penalty, right? His or hers? I saw his mom leave. Gosh, this is horrible. The first death penalty case I've ever done. So, of course, I've never heard a closing like this. The only death penalty case I've ever done was an old one that I already knew the guy got the death penalty. But I don't remember anything like this. This is ridiculous. Trying to tell a jury that they're a murderer just like the person they're going to sentence to death? That's okay. Family leave. But I couldn't see hers anymore. I think the camera just wasn't picking them up. Yeah, we're in South Florida. Throw him to the Gators. Yeah, like she looked like she wanted to come at the man, and I don't blame her.
You may continue.
What I'm saying to you is the process that you are relying on. This is a moral decision that you make as individuals. And it should be based on a system that you understand and that you can follow.
Oh, he lost.
I am going to talk about
Aw, poor guy.
what you've been asked to do last week and what you're asked to do now. And I'm going to do a compare and contrast. At no point am I suggesting that anything you do or might do is illegal. I am not asking that anything you do or not do is in any way related to you being murderers or illegal
That's
killers
what you just said.
or equating you in any moral way with Jose.
Just saying. Liar.
But you were asked last week to convict a man because he thought about doing a killing beforehand and did it. What are you being asked to do?
Objection, again, improper argument. The difference is
I'll complete the thought and I'll rule on the objection if there is one.
The process that is before you, if you follow the instructions and carry it out and think about it, means that you're thinking about forming the intention to ask the judge, recommend the judge to kill Jose. So in this circumstance, it's righteous, right? So sometimes thinking real hard about doing a killing is okay. If you're comfortable with that. If you should go back there at 8 or more of you decide independently, and by the way, this is an independent thing. I don't say you can't talk to one another or nothing like that. But so far you have kind of walked the path together. Jury selection, you get on the jury, you hear the evidence, you've made your decision, and now all of you stand here at the point together. But you've sort of come up the stem or the base of a Y, and now you're at the V part and you're looking at the crossroads. That's where the law has deposited you now. And I have acknowledged that the state has demonstrated that there are aggravators. And as I told you, the gate is open for you to kill. And I recommended humility. I recommend you don't go down that path. I wonder, with that gate open, I don't actually think so, looking at you, but if any of you might now or in 5 minutes or 10 minutes regard it as some sort of a temptation. No one gets to be in your position, very few people to say, live or die. Look at here he is, live or die, it's up to you. It might be tempting. Walk the path that people don't get to walk. It's a forbidden path. Highly forbidden. But it's open to you if you should find it alluring or tempting in any way. The forbidden fruit of control over someone's life or death. You're not in the Garden of Eden being tempted. You're in the Valley of Death being tempted. Walk out of it. Go away. Take the other path. Do not do any killing that is not absolutely required, and this is not required ever.
Don't use... Dude, don't use Bible analogies if you don't know your Bible. God created the death penalty. He set it up it's in the covenant he made with Moses. He created the death penalty. So don't use Bible analogies if you don't know your Bible, dude. Yes, God is merciful, but he also created the death penalty.
Sometimes large matters can be understood in simple ways and things that might happen all of a sudden. And you don't even know it until it happens. And one of those, I'm going to hang with me here if you can on this example, is I call it lean in, lean out. Lean in, lean out. People, they lean in, they like something. They lean out when they don't. Lean in to give that first kiss. Hopefully someone's leaning back. Maybe they're not. Maybe they get to lean back. me, of course. But I use the example in this way. If you are a juror who votes to impose the death penalty, and you should remember this is an abiding decision. You're good with it now, you're good with it tomorrow, you're good with it forever. You should end up in conversation with someone, the topic comes up. And what did you do? I voted to kill him. Whoa. You're going to get the whoa. You're not going to get the what? And the person hasn't even had a chance to think about it. It hasn't penetrated to the consciousness of that hearer at all. You're going to get this, you're going to draw back and whoa because you just admitted to them that
What are people gonna think?
you're on the spectrum. You're on the killing spectrum. You're not over here, the rest of us having nothing to do with it. You just said, yeah, I set a man up to die. And that doesn't get up. That gets up. Think about that. This is a big decision. Yeah, I'm just not done. I'm running out of juice.
Good. Shut up and sit down.
When you go home this afternoon, after having come back and given us your decision, you will now be a life giver or a life taker.
But they're gonna go home?
You're not going to be the same.
Didn't you say they were gonna go home and come back?
If you vote to set the wheels in motion, to give a heavy recommendation to this judge to kill this man, you're not going to be the same. This is a life taker. You are not. Leave the life taker alone on the spectrum of death. Don't take a step nearer to him. And you don't have to. I invite you in my final words to consult your best selves, the highest portions of your consciences, the lightness in your heart, not the darkness in your heart. To rot and die in prison is not merciful. It's a horrible sentence. Do that to him. Thank you.
Thank you, attorneys. Members of the jury, I'm about to instruct you before you deliberate. The instructions, just as in the guilt phase, are in writing, and a copy for each of you will go back into the jury room during deliberations for your further reference should you need it. However, do pay close attention to the instructions I'm about to give you. And for those of you who are in the audience, the instructions will only take about 10 minutes. You must stay for the entire instructions so as to not distract the jury as they pay close attention to these instructions. Members of the jury, you have heard all the evidence and argument of counsel. Now you must decide whether the defendant should be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole or to death. In making your decision, you must first unanimously determine whether the aggravating factors alleged by the state have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. An aggravating factor is the only circumstance recognized by Florida law that could result in a defendant receiving the death penalty. An aggravating factor increases the gravity of a crime or the harm to a victim beyond the harm inherent in every first-degree murder. You must not consider any other facts as an aggravating factor other than what has been alleged and proven by the state beyond a reasonable doubt. The aggravating factors alleged by the state applicable to each victim are: 1, the defendant was previously or contemporaneously convicted of another capital felony. The crimes of first-degree murder and first-degree murder of an unborn child are capital felonies. 2, the first-degree murder was committed for financial gain. And 3, the first-degree murder was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense of moral or legal justification. The term cold means the murder was the product of calm and cool reflection. The term calculated means having a careful plan or pre-arranged design to commit murder. A killing is premeditated if it occurs after the defendant consciously decides to kill. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. However, for this aggravating factor to apply, a heightened level of premeditation demonstrated by a substantial period of reflection is required. A pretense of moral or legal justification is any claim of justification or excuse that, though insufficient to reduce the degree of murder, nevertheless rebuts the otherwise cold, calculated, or premeditated nature of the murder.
I remember Cape
The
Fear.
aggravating factor alleged by the state that applies only to the unborn child is the victim of the first-degree murder was a person less than 12 years of age. You have heard evidence about the impact of this murder on the family, friends, or community of Tania Wise and her unborn child. This evidence was presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resultant loss by Tania Wise's death and that of her unborn child. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating factor. The state has the burden to prove an aggravating factor beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to disregard an aggravating factor if you have an abiding conviction that it exists. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, you do not have an abiding conviction that the aggravating factor exists, or if having a conviction, it is one which is not stable, but one which wavers and vacillates, then the aggravating factor has not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is an aggravating factor from a convincing factor. You must find that it does not exist. However, if you have no reasonable doubt, you should find the aggravating factor does exist. A finding that an aggravating factor exists must be unanimous. That is, all of you must agree that each alleged aggravating factor exists. You will be provided a form to make this finding as to each alleged aggravating factor, and you should indicate whether you find each aggravating factor has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and the verdict form itself is in conformity with that. As to each of the counts, there's a section for you to do just that, and it will be self-explanatory when you see it. If you do not unanimously find that at least one aggravating factor was proven by the state beyond a reasonable doubt, then the defendant is not eligible for the death penalty and your deliberations are complete. If, however, you unanimously find that at least one aggravating factor has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then the defendant is eligible for the death penalty, and you must consider additional matters to determine whether the appropriate penalty should be life in prison without the possibility of parole or death. First, each of you must determine whether any mitigating circumstances exist. A mitigating circumstance is not limited to the facts surrounding the crime. A mitigating circumstance may include any aspect of the defendant's character, background, or life, or any circumstance of the offense that may indicate the death penalty is not appropriate in this case. It is the defendant's burden to prove that one or more mitigating circumstances exists. Mitigating circumstances need not be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Instead, the defendant need only prove a mitigating circumstance by the greater weight of the evidence, which means evidence that more likely than not tends to establish the existence of a mitigating circumstance. If circumstance exists, you must consider proving that evidence such weight as you determine it should receive. You need not reach a unanimous decision about whether the defendant has proven the existence of a mitigating circumstance. Any juror persuaded as to the existence of a mitigating circumstance must consider it in this case. Among the mitigating circumstances you may consider are: 1. Jose Soto-Escalera has no significant history of prior criminal activity, and 2. The existence of any other factors in Jose Soto-Escalera's character, background, or life, or the circumstances of the offense that would mitigate against the imposition of the death penalty. A list is attached hereto to these instructions for your convenience regarding the defendant's proposed mitigating circumstances alluded to by his attorney. That is, the list is behind your instructions as Mr. Burns argued them. The final step in the process is for the jury to determine whether the defendant should be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole or to death. In making your decision, you must weigh all of the following factors. 1, whether sufficient aggravating factors exist. And 2, whether the proven aggravating factor or factors outweigh the proven mitigating circumstances. The process of weighing aggravating factors and mitigating circumstances is not a mechanical or mathematical process. In other words, you should not merely total the number of aggravating factors and compare that number to the total number of mitigating circumstances. The law contemplates that different factors or circumstances may be given different weight or values by different jurors. Therefore, in your decision-making process, each individual juror must decide what weight is to be given to a particular aggravating factor or mitigating circumstance. Regardless of the results of each juror's individual weighing process, even if you conclude that the sufficient aggravators outweigh the mitigators, the law neither compels nor requires you to recommend that the defendant should be sentenced to death. If fewer than 8 jurors vote for the death penalty, the court must sentence the defendant to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If 8 or more jurors vote for the death penalty, your recommendation is for the death penalty. This recommendation is not binding on the court. However, I am required to assign and give great weight and deference to your recommendation. You will be provided a form to reflect your decisions, which is a verdict form. The fact that the jury can make its decision on a single ballot should not influence you to act hastily or without due regard to the gravity of these proceedings. Before you vote, you should carefully consider and weigh the evidence, realizing that a human life is at stake, and bring your best judgment to bear in reaching your decisions. That concludes the instructions, and at this time, the jury, with the exception of our 4 alternates who now at this stage know who they are, that Ms. Emmert, here, the remainder may proceed to the jury room, and if the alternates have items in the jury room, the ballots will retrieve them. The jury should proceed to the jury room to consider its verdict. All right, the jury has exited this time. Ladies, this actually does conclude completely your service in the case. I want to reiterate what I told you, whenever that was. When was that? Last week, some point, that you know what the purpose was for you in this case. If someone had fell ill or had some other circumstance that required them not to be here or did not permit them to be here, you would have taken their place. And alternate jurors are so important to us because of the gravity of this case and how long it's been around and how long it takes to try it. For that reason, we had 4 alternates, which is probably a record for me. Normally I have 2 or 3 at most, but we went with 4 just because we wanted to be sure that we would conclude this case. So that's why we had 4 of you. And we got lucky. We didn't lose any jurors. But the whole point of me explaining that to you is to sincerely express on behalf of everyone here how appreciative we are of your time, which is an extremely significant amount of time. I hope you found the experience rewarding and educational at a minimum. I always feel a degree of guilt on my own behalf because you were alternates that didn't serve, but it does conclude your service. I do want to advise you of a very special privilege that you have. Even though you are not involved in the deliberation process and deciding the guilt phase or this part, you still have a privilege not to speak to anyone should you wish. No one can compel you to speak about the case other than by court order. And you should realize that in a case of this magnitude, with so much attention paid to it, people may be curious or they may seek to find fault with the process. Realize that before you decide whether to exercise your privilege not to speak about the case. But you are allowed to speak about the case. That's the whole point of that. The rules governing your conduct no longer exist. You're free from all of that. But you're free, with my thanks on behalf of the United States and the state of Florida. Thank you so much, ladies. You are free to leave at this time. The bailiffs will assist you. And if the lawyers could check on the objects to go back, the items and evidence, I think they're just the defendant's photographs, right? Yes. And the verdict form and the instructions are there, or? Yes. Photos. Okay. All right, so we'll be in recess awaiting the jury decision in this case. And, all right, committees until that happens. Very good. Go off the record.
Well, crap. The next string. But I don't know what you're doing. Tell you to do anything. Good gravy, Murray. Because we have another trial to go to. Or get back to, I should say. So, is Marty still here? I know he's just doing his job. I don't have a problem with him doing his job. If I was a defense attorney and my client was up against the death penalty, I would do the same thing. I was upset because he was telling the jury that they were murderers too if they sentence him to the death penalty. Yeah, this is what they've already deliberated and found him guilty. So this is just for the death penalty. So they'll come back and say either death penalty or life without parole. So that's all this is. And I'm sure it'll be quick because Judy said that the guilty deliberation was about an hour. I thought it was less than that. So that's why I was upset, Marty. Not because he was doing his job. I knew he was doing his job. But I think it's unfair to tell a jury that if they vote for the death penalty that they're murderers. Because I don't feel like that's fair. I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's fair. And in this case, I don't know what I would vote. Even though I'm not opposed to the death penalty, but this is his first offense. So I honestly don't know what I would vote. I'm very angry at what he did, but I don't know. Since in Florida, life without parole is life, because we don't have parole. You don't get off, like if you've served 85% and you're the model prisoner, you don't get up for parole in Florida. So he will be in prison for the rest of his life. He will never be able to stick it in somebody else and make another kid that he doesn't want. Or another kid that he's going to leave, So I really don't care either way this time. So I don't know how I would vote. And I get the way he was talking was that this is an independent thing this time, that they don't have to get together and talk about it. So I don't know if I was on the jury what I would do. If I can't talk it over with somebody, I have no idea. And like if he had done other bad things before and been in trouble with the law a whole lot and just defied rules and was just a generally bad person, but even though he left the other kids and cheated on women and stuff, he still took care of his other kids. So, well, yeah, that's true. You give him the death penalty, it doesn't bring back. Convicting somebody of a murder doesn't bring it back. Like you talk to survivors, or I shouldn't say survivors, but like families of victims, they're like, I thought this would bring me closure, but it really doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, like Brooks. That man deserved the death penalty. But they don't have the death penalty in Wisconsin. If anybody deserved it, Brooks deserved it. Those kind of people deserve the death penalty. People like Brooks. This guy, I don't know. I really don't know how I would vote in his case. But what made me mad about that guy was that he was telling the jury they would be murderers, that they would be just as bad as him, that they were doing premeditated murder on him, just like he did on Tanya. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. So that's what I didn't like. That was why I was upset. I mean, I was upset, yeah, like I got upset with the guy, but that's just because he was defending a POS, but I wasn't really mad about that because he is doing his job. But calling the jury murderers, no, they're not murderers. You can't say, well, he's on the spectrum of death, and so are you if you give him the death penalty. And the 3 distinct guilt trips, as Terry said, guilt trip number 1, and then guilt trip number 2, and then I don't know if Terry left, but then guilt trip number 3 was, well, what if you're talking to a friend or a family member about your jury service and they said, well, did you vote for the death penalty? That's ridiculous. So now you're going to be ashamed to tell people that you voted for the death penalty. He tried to guilt them every way he could. You are still here. You're going to be a murderer. Your family and friends are going to judge you. And I don't remember what the second guilt trip was. But anyways, 3 distinct guilt trips. And you're not supposed to play on the jury's emotions. Well, you're not in the main case. I don't know. Maybe you're allowed to in the death penalty, in the penalty phase part. I don't know. But calling them a murderers just was too far for me. And then when he did the jury instruction, when he reworded it, and they finally objected, that I got excited. I was like, yes! Because that was just too far. Because what if somebody had really taken that to heart? Okay, so I'm a Christian. I believe we should live by the 10 Commandments. But like I said earlier, God set up, I won't go into details, but in the Bible, it is approved that if you kill somebody, you should be killed. Now, of course, that's biblical times. Times have changed. We don't kill everybody that kills somebody anymore. But that's why Christians are in favor of the death penalty. But let's say you're sitting on a jury and the lawyer tells you, oh, well, if you vote for the death penalty, then you're a murderer too. So I'm a Christian here. Am I going to think, oh my God, that makes me a murderer? That means that I'm going to sin if I vote for the death penalty. You can't do that. You can't tell somebody they're going to be a murderer if they follow the law. That's not right. That's a guilt trip. That's a guilt trip. Bye, John. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yay! I enjoyed you being here. Nice meeting you. That was just too far of a guilt trip for me. I think that was over the line. Calling the jury murderers, I think, was over the line. Because I know, well, they know the makeup of the jury because they talk to them in voir dire. I don't know the makeup of the jury, but people have strong convictions about murder. Exactly. And that's why there's in the Bible why it's called for that. But we have a modern justice system, And this is the way we do it now. But, you know, like if he's in Gin Pop, he might have a harder time. Unless, like, I think somebody said, unless they put him in protective custody. I forgot who said that, but. So, yeah. I was going to say, should we wait or should we go to the other trial? But I don't want to just sit here and wait. Because you guys will get bored, and then you'll start to leave, and then I'll start to tell stupid stories, and then you'll get bored and leave, and... I don't know what Shadow did to my laptop, but it does not want to do anything I want it to do now. All she does is sit on it. How does she mess it up? I don't... Yes, yes, yes. We will. We will be jumping back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. This will be our last jump, though. When we go to the verdict for this one, it will be our last jump. And I hope we never do overlapping trials again, ever. Because I'm tired of jumping. If I had the room, like the storage space that I could download all of this and then chop it up and then put it in playlists, I would do that, but I don't. Maybe I need to buy some more external hard drives. Because the one that I have now is almost full. Wait a minute. Oh, and I think this one might be a death penalty case too. Because on Court TV, there was a poll asking if this guy should get the death penalty. Okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay. So this should redirect you. Okay, I'll see you over there in a few minutes.